The next thing you should have in your packet is something called 15 twos with the key connectors. Are you looking at the key connectors?
Key connectors.
Okay, I want to talk about these a little bit because they're very important whether you're discarding to your own crib, which we're going to be doing next week, discarding to your own crib, but of course we're going to play a little cribbage here starting at 8 o'clock, so you'll be doing some of that. There is a difference between these cards. If you look at the cards 1 through 4, the 3 is the strongest of those cards. The 1 is the weakest. The 4 is the second weakest. The 3 and the deuce really are about equal, but the 3 is a little worse. Because, you know, it works with those 6s and 9s and so on. So the 3 is the key connector. And if you can only put one small card to your crib, one small card to your crib. Say you're looking at a 3 and a king or a 3 and a jack, put the 3 in the jack. Because you're putting 2 key connectors, you're putting the jack among the face cards, which is the key connector, and the 3. You have a chance for a better crib than if you put, say, a 2 king or a 1 king, something like that. If you have a choice of only putting one small card in your crib, make it be the 3. If you have a choice of avoiding the 3 to your opponent crib, avoid it and put the 1 or the 4, preferably.
What about the 1 and the king?
Oh,
Why don't it's fine. A 1 and a king, 1 and a queen is better. The reason the 1 and the 10 works out for a higher average is because one of the dealer's favorite discards is an 8-9. So the 10 hits on the end of the 8-9. Very often a run of 8. So whereas the king doesn't hit that and the queen doesn't hit that. Remember, the middle cards are likely to be in the crib. If not the 7-8, the 8-9, the 6-8, the 7-9, so on. So, and then if you look at the middle cards, there's a big difference in them too. The 9, if you're throwing one middle card to your opponent, the 9 is the safest if you put it with the king or the queen. Of the middle cards, the 9 is the safest. The next safest is the 6. Again, preferably. Actually, it's good with any of those, but if you're thinking the king with any card is better than the jack with the same card. See, if you looked at a king with a queen, a king, so on down all the way to the ace, the king with those cards has a lower average to your opponent than does the jack. And I hear a lot of people say, well, the kings are always in the crib.
There's a reason.
No, there's a reason they don't work with nothing else. They're at the end of the deck. But there's also a reason that's how you'll keep your opponent's crib score low, is if you're putting a king. If you're putting a jack, you're going to get bit pretty frequently. And the jack is worth 1 point 25% of the time anyway. So it has a heads-up start by matching the suit on the deck. And the 7, of course, if you can only put one middle card in your own crib, let it be the 7. If you can avoid putting just the 7, you know how often you put a king 7 and it's worth 12? Well, you can try it with a jack, it'll be worth 13. Okay? Because again, the dealer's going to have 2 middle cards down there, very high percentage of the time. So the 7 should be your last choice on the middle cards to your opponent's crib, should be the first one to your own. If you're throwing middle cards to your crib and you can only do one, let it be the 7. And of course the 5 is a strong card. You don't want to turn loose a 5 most of the time. In fact, I got to tell you a story. Somebody here early, well, it was you, Channing, talked about picking up a hand 2 7s and 2 8s or something like that with a pair of 5s and pitching the 5s to the crib. Well, when you get to see my numbers on discarding, you'll notice that there's very few 5-5 discards in my opponent's crib. In all the time I kept track, which was 9 years, I did it 23 times. I quit doing it entirely. So if you want to experiment with it, fine. Just tell me what the results are. Because the last 2 times I did it, it was worth 23 and 28. 51 points on 2 cribs. And what really got to me on the second one, I'm playing a fella in Redmond, Oregon. I pitch 2 7s and 2 8s. I pitch him 2 5s. He deals himself 2 2 3 4 5 5. He pitches 2 5s, and I cut the 10 of diamonds. Well, when I cut the 10 of diamonds, I said, "Oh shit! Oh, I mean, shoot!" Yeah. Well, that's what I said. Yeah, you got it. He said, "What's the trouble?" I said, "I gave you a pair of 5s." He said, "Well, that's funny. So did I." And you know he died 10 days later. I think it was a shock. I don't think he ever recovered from that 28 trip.
He died a happy man.
So I have not thrown him since.
Don't want to kill anybody else.
I've not thrown him since. 5 key connectors. Remember, we lose sight of the fact that the 5 works very nicely with a 1-9, a 2-8, a 3-7, a 4-6, and all of those face cards, and the 2-3 and the 1-4. You know, I mean, it just connects a whole lot of things in this deck. So we don't want to turn loose at 5 unless we absolutely have to have the 12. If I was 20 points out of the game. See, so sometimes, I mean, you just throw them. The only chance I had was to cut a 6 or a 9. So, but if I didn't need that big hand and the game was nicking right close to close and I was about where I wanted to be, I would throw the 5-8. If 6 points was enough, I would throw the 5-8 rather than the 5-5. Because, see, the truth is, to the dealer, the 5-5 average is almost 9 to your own crib, which means that it averages almost 10 to the other person's crib. So I'm holding 12 and giving up 10. See?
Not a good trade.
It's not too good. Actually, the difference is not much difference between doing the 5-8 and playing 6. But the 5-8 is certainly going to result in a lower number of cribs of 8 points or more, and a very much lower number of cribs of 12 points and more. Whereas the 5-5 is going to result in a lot of those big cribs. And remember the jack. Remember the jack to your own crib. If you can only put one face card, it's the best. Not the king. Every week I hear people say, "Oh, they always throw a king in my..." Well, yeah, you might get 2 if you throw a king. But the jack is the connector. And instead of getting the 2, you'll maybe pick up a double run quite frequently with the jack, because the jack is the one card that your opponent will not give you. Your opponent will keep the jack with a 6, 7, 8. Keep the jack with deuces and trays, with 1s and 4s. He'll keep the jack any way he can to keep from putting in your crib. So if you can put it in your crib, you got a chance to score a pretty decent crib. But you've got to provide the jack.